Hi, I'm Neil Christensen, author of Dark White and Malcolm Karma Cold Turkey, and this is another sporadic installment of I'm Reading House of Leaves, so you don't have to. Today we're covering Chapter 11. Chapter 11 takes us back in time to the beginning of the rescue mission. Navidson and Reston have already gone down the stairs and left Tom at the top as a radio communication relay back to Karen in the house. The chapter starts with a short snippet of a French poem by Charles Baudelaire. Johnny tells us that it translates to something about terror of the staircase. The editors tell us in a footnote that it translates to, the poet, sick, and with his chest half bare, tramples a manuscript in his dark stall, gazing with terror at the yawning stair, which his spirit finally must fall. My translations aren't quite so on the nose. The various resources I used all came back with something more like the poet in the dungeon, sickly and unkempt, rolling a manuscript under his convulsed foot, measures with a look that terror inflames the stairway of vertigo down which his soul plunges. I think the book massaged the translation a bit to make it more clear to the reader the parallels with the story. Then, Chapter 11 continues with some academic analysis of Will and Tom's relationship. They compare it to the biblical story of Esau and Jacob. There is some debate as to which brother is represented by which biblical brother, and some debate as to whether it's actually Will and Holloway that are a better parallel. Ultimately, the inclusion of this section is less about the actual comparison and more about the fact that Zampano, apparently, after working for days on researching and writing the section, ended up destroying most of it, tearing it into shreds and throwing it in the trash and some of it down the toilet. What remains was what was recovered by Zampano's scribe and put into the chest where Johnny found it.
The whole thing was really quite brilliant. I helped him a little with the Hebrew, but he really didn't need my assistance, except to write down what he said. This incredible analysis about parental blessing, sibling rivalry, birthright, and all the time quoting from memory entire passages from the most obscure books. He possessed a pretty uncanny ability to recite verbatim almost anything he'd read, and let me tell you, he'd read a lot. Incredible character. Then one day I arrived at his place and the pages had vanished. Also, all his fingers were bandaged. He mumbled something about falling, scraping up his hands. At first, he ignored me when I asked him about our work, but when I persisted, he muttered something like, "What difference does it make? They're dead anyway, right? Or not alive, however you want to look at it." I told him I didn't understand, so he just said it was too personal, an unrealized theme, poorly executed, a complete mess. When I went to the bathroom, I found the pages, or I should say, I found what was left of them. He had torn them to shreds. They were in the wastebasket, some strewn on the floor, no doubt a fair share lost down the toilet. Most of the pieces were stained with blood.
Zampano then goes back to the narrative of the rescue, telling the whole story again, but this time from Tom's point of view, at the top of the stairs. By the end of the first night, Tom has begun to feel the terrible strain of that place. Fortunately for us, some trace of the struggle survives on his High 8, where Tom recorded an eclectic, sometimes funny, sometimes bizarre, history of thoughts passing away in the atrocity of that darkness. Here we get a transcript of what was recorded by Tom in his time at the top of the stairs. Tom feels haunted in the space. He believes ghosts or monsters are surrounding him in the dark. He personifies these feelings into a creature he calls Mr. Monster, who he speaks to regularly. As time goes on, he begins to go mad, both in the sense of anger at Will for bringing him here, and also in the sense that he's losing his grip on reality. His radio communication with Karen is one of the few times when he comes across as lucid. He is worried about her as she tells him that the children can still hear the voices coming from the walls. As his mental state continues to deteriorate, he starts telling jokes to Mr. Monster. They're crude and funny and reassure us that he still has some of his faculties about him. In the middle of the transcript, we get another one of Johnny's tangential footnotes, where he describes a story that is both gruesome and tragic. This is a content warning if cruelty to animals is something that will be triggering for you. Johnny tells us that about a month before he had ever heard of Zampano, he and Lude had come into a huge amount of ecstasy. They had used it to get into parties and meet women. No matter how zealously guarded these events were, the pills were our hand grenades. They got us in everywhere. After a month of non-stop, endless partying, the drugs were gone, and Johnny was exhausted and completely burnt out. He tried to retreat to his apartment, but Lude pulled him out again for another night out on the town, where he sent Johnny to hook up with a woman he believed to be an adult film actress. Johnny did connect with her, and they talked at the bar for about 20 minutes before the place started closing down, and she asked him to walk her to her truck. On the way, they found an abandoned Pekingese dog without tags. It was dirty, scared, and obviously without an owner. Johnny picked it up and cradled it gently in his arms. He felt a deep sense of protection for the animal. Wiping some of the snot on the sleeve of my buttonless corduroy coat, deciding as I did this, making a mess of myself, to take it home with me. The girl, though, wouldn't have it. She said his studio wasn't good enough for such a sweet dog, and convinced Johnny to let her take the dog home, where she had a yard and space for it to run and play. Reluctantly, Johnny agreed. The girl then gave Johnny a ride home, where, after dropping him off, I watched her taillights trail down the street, still feeling uncertain, but a little relieved, until, as I turned to go inside, I heard the thump. The one I remember even now so clearly, an eerie, awful sound. Not too loud, slightly hollow in fact, amounting to just that, a thump, like that. Thump. I looked down the street. Her truck was gone, but behind it, in its wake, something dark rolled into the light of the street lamp. Something Johnny had thrown out her window as she passed the parked cars. I jogged down the block, feeling more than a little uneasy, until, as I approached that clump of something on the side of the road, I discovered, much to my dismay, all of my uneasiness confirmed. Back in the transcript of Tom's recording, he is trying to comfort and reassure Karen, who says things are only getting worse in the house. She goes on to tell him that all the feng shui objects that she had bought to put around the house in order to correct the negative energy had completely vanished, disappeared from the house. Similarly, Tom laments to his imaginary Mr. Monster on his video recording that he has been pissing and shitting in a corner for days, and each day the crap has mysteriously vanished. This is where we catch up with the timeline from the previous chapter, with Will calling Tom over the radio to meet him at the bottom of the stairs to help out with the injured Jed. Tom tries to force himself down the stairs. Tom descends a few steps, then quickly retreats. No can do. Then, as Tom starts down the second flight, the stairs suddenly stretch and drop 10 feet. Tom looks up and sees the circular shape of the stairwell bend into an ellipse before snapping back to a circle again. And then, out of nowhere, comes that growl. More like a roar, almost deafening, as if it originated right next to Tom. Tom panics and sprints back up the stairs. A minute later, Tom reaches the top. Tom to Karen. Karen? Karen, are you all right? Tom, I'm coming in. This is the first time in the book that we've had the same event told twice from two different perspectives. It's interesting to see how Will's brother wants to be there for him, wants to give him his service, but his own anxiety prevents him from being able to follow through with it. While all accounts of the brothers' relationship up until now in the book have portrayed Tom as the dutiful brother and Will as the more selfish sibling, I'm not sure that this moment reverses that as a pattern, but it does make Tom a more rounded character, showing his willingness to abandon his brother when his own fears overtake him. So that's it for Chapter 11. Next up, obviously, Chapter 12. If you are enjoying these, I really ask that you go ahead and hit the subscribe button, the bell if that's your thing. But the subscribe really helps. And leave comments. That helps a lot too. Let me know how this is working for you. And yeah, you can also support the channel by buying my books. Dark White is available everywhere books are sold, as is Malcolm Karma Cold Turkey. See you next time on I'm Reading House of Leaves, so you don't have to.